Chris Schmidt with Greg Smith, HailVarsity.com. A stunner in Lincoln, Nebraska falling to Troy. 24-19, Greg. I don't know where you were at coming into this contest. I thought Nebraska would respond. I thought they'd win. Troy's tough. They've got a well-deserved reputation. They earned it. They made more plays than Nebraska. And some of the same bugaboos this week from last week when it comes to penalties, turnovers, and just some big-time plays that weren't made.
Right, a continuation of the same, I guess, from last week is that I thought that, when you hear this, and a lot of people say it's coach speak, but I do think it happens to be true, that you see the biggest growth between week 1 and week 2. This was Nebraska's week 2 after having that canceled game against Akron in week 1. We didn't really see that growth. I'm struggling to come up with many areas that we really saw that growth. I thought the defense was solid again, but otherwise, some of the same issues that we saw last week, we saw again this week, and Nebraska just isn't in a position yet where they can make those type of mistakes over and over again and then come out on top in a football game.
Well, you had the quarterback spot a big point of discussion this week, and you had Andrew Bunch come in, not awful numbers, made some plays, there were some mistakes, but the offense really never got clicking. And this game today was going to be at the offensive line and defensive line. Nebraska's still struggling on third and shorts and to get a consistency when it comes to the run game.
Yeah, and I think that you put it perfectly there. The offense just wasn't clicking, right? Is that you're used to seeing with this offense, and you saw it when it was at its height last year at UCF, right? Where when they're rolling, like it's just points on points and yards on yards, Nebraska just seemed like it was too herky-jerky. Stop and go, stop, start, however you want to put it. It just was a little bit more of a struggle than it probably should have been against Troy. There were some bright spots on offense. J.D. Spielman had a nice game. Maurice Washington really kind of burst onto the scene today, which will probably get lost in all honesty. But it just wasn't consistent enough offensively for them today.
When it comes to the passing game, there were attempts to get it to stand. J.D. Spielman showed up. He had a touchdown. But really, again, the passing game never really clicked. The offense couldn't get going. And let's talk about the start. 17-0 Nebraska down in the hole. Put a drive together, Bunch and company did, to make it 17-7. But really, Nebraska got a gift of a fumbled punt attempt. Took over, couldn't convert. They got 3 instead of 7. That was kind of the theme for Nebraska.
Yeah, it definitely was. Digging that hole to start, which is something that plagued this team last year under a different coaching staff. And it seems like it's just been recent memory here with Nebraska football has been those slow starts. You thought even with this 11 o'clock kickoff that Nebraska would come out better than that, considering they've now switched to those morning practices. They're used to getting up early and getting their bodies going. And it still kind of plagues them. With Nebraska being able to find that way to start fast and to be able to impose their will early is something that just eludes this football program.
Nebraska's last win a year ago against Purdue. And that says a lot right there. As we wrap up here, on to Michigan. That front seven of Mr. Brown's defense, impressive. Kudos to Troy, of course, for coming in and winning, but what's next week look like for the Big Red?
It's got to look like a little bit more imaginative offense, more consistent offense, get back to the type of football offensively that we thought we were going to see out of Scott Frost and company. The defense, I think, if they can continue to play the way that they played today, they still got some little things here and there to clean up. You want them to capitalize on more turnovers if they're getting this amount of pressure and sacks. But I feel like they should be able to hold their own against Michigan's offense. It's whether or not next week's game is all about Nebraska's offense, in my opinion, already in the early preview here. Can they go out there and put up enough points? Can they limit turnovers? Because if they can't, it's going to be tough in Ann Arbor.
Last thought here, will special teams be better next week?
It has to be. There's not a lot of ways to go the other way unless you continue to have more fumbles, but they've got to figure out a way. I think Coach Frost put it as it's got to mean something to everybody, that special teams unit. And I think that starts with another solid week of practice. They've got to get better there because that is a part of the game that could help win Nebraska these close football games versus losing them.
That's Greg Smith, Chris Schmidt for HailVarsity.com. We'll catch up with you next week.